Nine Souls is not just Hollow Knight with a parry. Just like Lady Ethereal isn't just mentally unstable Mantis Lords, and the Shanghai 9000 isn't just Cornifer if he were a fish. But they're kinda close, aren't they? Now, don't worry, I'm not really here to draw a bunch of surface level comparisons between these two games. Anyone who's actually played both of them knows that they feel drastically different, from the tone to the levels to the progression, but the difference that caught me off guard the most was the combat. On first glance, they seem like they'd be similar. They've both got the same standard swipe, dash, projectile, and even pogo attack, but when it comes to using these tools to take out an opponent, they couldn't feel more different, and it's all because of, you guessed it, the parry. Now, if you take a second to think about it, a parry is a truly insane thing to add to a video game. It's a single button that, if used properly, makes you completely immune to your opponent's attacks. They often don't require any setup, can be as fast as you can press the button, and are generally accompanied with additional rewards if you land them. So it's not surprising to see how combat systems that include them often appear to warp around the technique. Depending on the game, they can either be a way to show off your skill or a requirement to engage with the game at all, but they're almost always incredibly strong, and Nine Souls is no exception. But before I continue, spoiler warning. I won't be talking about story at all in this video, but I will be showing footage of late game enemies and bosses, so if you want to avoid that, you have my sincere apologies for that bit about Lady Ethereal at the start of this video, and you should probably head out before I start showing footage of the final boss. Cool? Cool. Let's get started. So, Nine Souls parry. How does it work? Well, it's as simple as facing your opponent, tapping L1 right as their attack lands, and boom, you've prevented all damage from the attack. The parry window itself is rather small, but it's followed by a roughly half-second window where you can imprecise parry, where you'll take some internal damage. Health loss to internal damage will regenerate over time, and it can't kill you, so as long as you parry within a little over half a second of any attack, you'll never die. Instantly, you can see how this could have a massive effect on the game. A spammable, decently long move where you're basically immune to damage is kind of insane. And to see how the developers balanced it, we need to take a look at the enemy design. By most standards, the hitbox of the most basic enemy's attack is broken. It's way too big, hits both in front and above him, and has weird lingering issues that'll cause it to hit you when it really feels like it shouldn't have, and this is all pretty much intentional. Look at a game like Hollow Knight, and the starting area is full of enemies whose main form of attack is contact damage, literally just running at you until they're close enough for a not-so-friendly hug, or you've not-so-friendlily hit them so hard they explode. The focus here is entirely on positioning, physically moving your character out of the way of any given hitbox. This continues into the rest of the game, where enemies will become more complicated, but the way you deal with them stays the same. Simply get out of the way. A parry, naturally, changes all of this. Don't get me wrong, you still can get out of the way, especially with these starting enemies. They can't exactly chase you down, but as you can see from the hitbox stuff earlier, it's not exactly the easiest or most intuitive thing to do. I'd go so far as to say the developers are actively discouraging that movement-focused style of gameplay. Your attacks lock you in place, preventing you from getting out of the way of any retaliatory hits, your dash has a lengthy cooldown that prevents you from using it often, and it's flat out disabled in the air until partway through the game, heavily discouraging you from trying to jump away from or over whatever's coming at you. All of this encourages a significantly more grounded style of gameplay, where you meet every attack head-on without much in the way of actual movement. Even though you can parry in midair, it bounces you upwards, and the lack of airborne mobility makes the sky a rather inconvenient place to be 90% of the time. It might seem weird at first, how much effort the devs put into making anything other than the parry feel unviable, but I think it's a good decision in the long run. After all, if you don't force players to get used to the parry in the starting areas, how can you expect them to adapt once it becomes required? Towards the end of the game, there are attacks that, as far as I'm concerned, cannot be dodged with any level of reliability. Rapid, screen-covering swipes and slashes that just can't be efficiently avoided without a truly insane amount of effort. It's in these fights, though, that I think Nine Souls truly shows off what makes it special. It becomes a sort of rhythm game, requiring precise timing as you hit the parry button in time to a telegraphed or memorized sequence. It's sure to be a familiar feeling to people who've played Sekiro, or, well, rhythm games, but that doesn't stop it from feeling any less good here. Any first attempt on a boss is bound to feel a bit spammy, as you all but mash the parry, desperately trying to shield yourself from unfamiliar attacks, building up that internal damage until a hit finally sneaks its way through. But after enough attempts, some attacks might as well not exist with how easy they are to counter with a single press of a button. This is the true strength of a parry. From the Souls games to Street Fighter, parries have always been a way to show mastery, to prove that you have not only figured out how to deal with your opponent's attacks, but you've also memorized the exact timing of every single hit. Mastery through repetition is the name of the game here, and when a game is focused as hard on parries as Nine Souls is, that means you're bound to lose countless times as you approach that mastery, but it's rare to beat a fight without truly feeling like you understand it. Bringing back the Hollow Knight comparison for what I swear is the final time, you could beat bosses in ways that felt scrambly, moving more off of reaction and instinct than pure memorization. This meant your skill from one fight transferred over nicely into the next, as you became more familiar with how best to move your character and stay safe. Pieces of those ideas are present in Nine Souls. Obviously, you don't lose all your experience going from fight to fight, but especially towards the end, it felt like you were learning fights from scratch every single time. The final boss took me out in under 10 seconds the first few times I tried it, and attacks felt wild and unpredictable, but now, I feel like I could parry them in my sleep. Now, neither of these two types of experiences are necessarily better than the other, they're fundamentally different, but I think it's interesting how different they feel when a simple parry was pretty much responsible for most of the differences. Speaking of, I haven't actually covered all the parts of the parry yet. After all, this isn't just an inconvenient shield, it's actually an incredibly valuable part of your strongest offensive technique. Key charges are an expendable resource that can only be gained through parries. These charges can be spent on a special dash that, when passing through an opponent, applies a talisman that can be exploded after the dash finishes, dealing significant damage and one-shotting many of the early game enemies. While the parry itself might be the most impactful addition to the game, and is definitely responsible for the unique way this game feels, it's the key charge system that actually lets it feel good. While your sword is your main form of offense, it kinda looks, feels, and hits like a wet noodle, so having an alternative, infinitely more satisfying attack that's tied directly to the main defensive mechanic of the game is incredibly important for bringing the whole gameplay experience together. It also enhances the flow between defense and offense, with the smooth transition between the parry and the talisman application clearly defining when it's your turn or your enemy's. You'll also be trying to get extra sword swipes in whenever you can find the opportunity, but this two-step process is what forms the backbone of almost every encounter in the game. Of course, this flow wouldn't be nearly as defined if using key charges wasn't as risky as it is. Not only is this dash not invincible, it also locks you in place as you detonate the talisman, preventing you from accessing your parry, and we've already established the nightmarish hitboxes this game likes to pull out. Especially once you get the upgraded version that lets you dump even more key charges into a single explosion, timing becomes incredibly important. Using this attack without any sort of plan is likely to get you hit, but not using it at all will massively decrease the amount of damage you do. This acts as a second layer to your analysis of enemy attack patterns. Not only are you timing the attacks, but you're also timing the gaps in between, looking for a chance to use your harder hitting ability. And it is hard hitting, more so than any other attack you can do in the game, and it needed to be. After all, it temporarily disables the most impactful defensive mechanic in this game. It needed to hit incredibly hard to make that offset worth it, and that's also why the special version that doesn't freeze you in place is a bit overpowered. But this is a video on the parry, not the key charges, and there's still one important thing I've yet to mention: the things you can't parry. In a game that relies this much on parrying, unparryable attacks are always going to be a big deal. The premise of the parry is absolute defense. You'll never get hit, never take a single point of damage as long as your timing is good enough and your finger doesn't cramp. This is fine, but if the only two verbs in this game were parry and attack, the gameplay would be at risk of becoming repetitive, and my finger would be at risk of falling off. Adding dodge into the mix provides some much needed variety, even if it isn't optimal 99% of the time. As I covered earlier, many of the enemy hitboxes in this game are designed specifically to stop you from physically moving out of the way, and even though your invincible dash is perfectly capable of iframing through most of these, it won't reward you with a key charge like a parry will. Unparryable attacks, designated by this Crimson Flash, are the main way the game forces you to switch it up. As you probably figured from the name, any attempt at parrying will fail miserably, so dodging is generally your only option. It still won't give you the same reward as a parry, but it provides a welcome shakeup from what would have otherwise been a pretty one-note defense system. Now, technically these attacks can be parried too. Early on, you're given the ability to counter a select few of them by parrying in the air, and later, the unbounded counter lets you parry all of them as long as you have time to charge it up. Both of these, despite being parries themselves, serve the same function as the dodge, forcing players to engage with defense beyond simply tapping a single button. The trade-offs of these two moves, being forced into the air and requiring a vulnerable charge period respectively, also lead to visible progression and mastery over the course of a fight. Initially, a player will likely use the dodge to deal with most unparryable attacks, as it's the fastest and easiest option, but as they grow used to the patterns and to the game in general, almost any Crimson Flash turns from something to avoid at all costs into a lucrative opportunity. The fight with the final boss is full of these moves, and with how it's designed, almost all of your openings are tied to these unparryable attacks. My first few attempts couldn't have been more different from my last, with all of the frantic, panicked dodging having turned to confident, flawless defense, and it's this steady transition from panicked evasion to confident counters that makes the whole system as satisfying as it is. You can feel your growth over time, actively experience the change in how much you fear attacks, and how well you can deal with them. In a combat system focused on evasion, you can definitely master how to avoid and even counter different moves, but with a parry, you get to feel like you're meeting them head on. It makes you feel untouchable, because for all intents and purposes, you are. It's the root of the entire combat system, something so strong that the entire experience depends on it, with no other mechanic coming even close in terms of importance. Having such a dominant mechanic can be a blessing or a curse. Basing almost every aspect of your combat around a single button means the enjoyment of that combat lives and dies on that button alone. But in this case, with this parry, I think it was done right. This video doesn't really have a thesis or anything. There's no neat summary statement for me to tie all this up with at the end. It was just a bunch of rambling about how the parry, and everything related to it, completely changed how this game felt to play, and influenced a bunch of decisions made around the combat in general. I can't say that it's the best parry ever, and I'm definitely not saying that it's the worst, but it is one of the most impactful, and left an impression on me large enough that I felt like taking the time to write all this out. It's also a smaller topic, so I can finish this all up before Silksong comes out. And Borderlands 4. And, college. But now that it's over, I can get on with enjoying those experiences and probably make some videos on them. Not college, but the other two for sure, so look forward to them in the future. But that's all for me for now, so I hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you again soon. See ya.